Armenia. The education system in Armenia is structured in 3 levels of compulsory education: 4 years of primary school, 5 years of basic school or the lower secondary, and 3 years of high school or the upper secondary. The system has undergone several reforms since the Soviet era.
We need to understand that in order for developing of a country, education is foundational. The only greatest capital that Armenia has is human capital. And for human capital development, we really need to have a very rigorous education system. To have a change in education, there are 3 ways. One is to create an alternative system, which we do not want to create. We don't want to have alternative realities. The second thing is to have small changes within an existing system, but it's not sustainable and it's not bringing this leapfrog development that we want for the country. So the only development option left is to change the system.
Some of the reforms done in the education system of Armenia includes the extension of compulsory schooling years from 10 to 12 years, a new grading system moving from 5 to 10-point scale, and the creation of separate high schools. Cyprus. Stages of educational system for early childhood education in Cyprus is categorized into 2: the preschool system and the pre-primary system. Primary education is provided in primary schools, and it comprises a 6-year course of general education beginning at the age 6 years. Lower secondary education comprises a 3-year course, and the upper secondary education involves a 3-year cycle and is offered in 2 different types of programs: the upper secondary general education program and the upper secondary technical and vocational educational program. The upper secondary general education schools are called lyceums, and their programs include both common core subjects and optional subjects of specialization. Secondary technical and vocational education, or STVE, is offered in the technical schools. The STVE programs include formal, technical, and vocational education offered in 2 streams: the theoretical stream and the practical stream. Georgia. Public education in Georgia is comprised of the following categories: kindergarten, age 2 to 5, elementary school grades 1 to 4, secondary school grades 5 to 9, and upper secondary school grades 10 to 11. Educational system in Georgia is not limited to general day schools. There are also boarding schools for children with disabilities and youth palaces for an intensive study of such subjects as art, music, drama, and dance. The school year in Georgia officially begins in September and ends in June. A typical school day generally lasts from 7 hours in upper school to as little as 3 hours in primary school. Iraq. Iraqi education is strictly controlled by the National Iraqi government through the Iraqi Ministry of Education. This public state education is provided free from the primary school all the way to doctoral degrees. Iraqi education is known to be of extremely high caliber throughout the Middle East, taught in both Arabic and English. Iraqi graduates have an advanced knowledge of complex subjects such as chemistry, math, biology, and other scientific fields of study. The official educational cycle in Iraq extends to 12 years, including 6 years of mandatory primary education, which starts from the age of 6 years, followed by 3 years of intermediate school, then 3 years of secondary education, which is divided into general secondary of scientific and literacy, and secondary vocational, industrial, agricultural, or commercial.
And diverse countries in
Israel. The Israel education system is governed by national laws that are implemented by the Ministry of Education, Culture, and Sport. The most important legislation governing primary and secondary education dates from 1949 and 1953, and from 1958 for higher education. Since 1949, public education has been compulsory and free for children aged between 3 and 15 until grade 10. A legislative change extending the age for compulsory education to the 11th and 12th year of secondary school is gradually being introduced. The language of education is either Hebrew or Arabic, and the national education system consists of 5 levels: pre-primary, primary, secondary, and higher education. Qatar. Education is free from Qatar. Students in government schools are provided books and transportation to and from schools. The 12-year public school system consists of a 6-year primary cycle followed by a 3-year secondary cycle and 3-year tertiary cycle, taking students up through the secondary level by Western educational standards. Education in Qatar has benefited greatly from oil revenues. The first schools in Qatar, before the beginnings of the modern education system, were religious in nature. Quranic schools where young boys learned and recite Quran and acquired basic Arabic literacy skills. UAE. The UAE education system is divided into 3 categories, which are public schools, private schools, and higher educational institutions. The public schools follow the Arabic curriculum. In the UAE, both primary and secondary education is free and compulsory in public schools for both boys and girls. The main medium of instruction is Arabic, and there is equal emphasis given on the English language. Usually, in the pre-secondary standard, there is no segregation of boys and girls. However, this practice is prevalent in the post-secondary standard. Kuwait. Kuwait is an Arab Gulf state where the dream is to provide ample free education for all children, regardless of gender, social class, or special needs. Kuwait's educational system comprises of 3 levels for the compulsory basic education: 5 years for the primary, 4 years for the intermediate, and 3 years for the secondary. Following a period of preschool orientation, gender-separated primary schooling begins at age 5 and lasts for 5 years. In the 1930s, after the devastation of the pearling-based Kuwaiti economy, the modern period of education in Kuwait was underway. Education was placed under state control in 1935, making the beginning of public education.